Hi everyone. If you think a big battery means you can just plug in your whole house and forget about power outages, this Jackery setup taught me something pretty quickly. Backup power still needs a plan. Today I'm sharing my experience with the Jackery Solar Generator 5000 setup, and I'm looking at it from a very practical point of view. Outages, camping, rural living, appliances, transfer switch use, solar charging, and the little software details that can make a big difference. I've used Jackery power stations before, including smaller units like the 250 and the 1000, and those have been reliable for years with no real issues. So when I moved up to this larger system, my expectations were pretty high. This is clearly a much more serious backup power setup. It feels well built, it has the kind of output options that make it useful beyond just charging phones and small electronics, and it can provide power through individual outlets or multiple plugs at the same time. Visually, this is not a tiny grab-and-go battery. It looks like a serious home backup unit. In an image-only video, I'd show it sitting beside a transfer switch, then beside a refrigerator, freezer, and maybe a well pump setup, because that's really where this product makes the most sense. It is for those moments when the lights go out and you're not just trying to keep a phone alive, but trying to keep important parts of your home running. For me, one of the biggest strengths is peace of mind. I live in an area where outages can happen, and having something that can run key household items is a big deal. I can run essentials like a fridge, freezer, other basic appliances, and even a 240 volts well pump. That is the kind of use case where this unit starts to feel valuable. If you are rural, or if you've ever been through a long outage where gas or propane was hard to find, you understand why a battery backup system is so appealing. That said, this is not magic unlimited power. You still have to be selective. If you are using it as a backup for a whole house, you need to decide what actually matters. Refrigerator? Yes. Freezer? Probably. Well pump? Maybe essential. Random extra appliances? Maybe not. This can power a home in a limited, planned way, but it is not something I would treat like the grid is still fully on. Under heavier 240 volts use, the runtime can be much shorter than people might expect, so planning ahead is important. I also tested the idea of using it with a camper. If you're trying to run a 50 amp camper and a mini split, you really need to pay close attention to how much power you're pulling and how you're charging the battery back up. Without enough solar input, the runtime can disappear faster than expected. This is one of those situations where the product itself, but the full setup has to be matched correctly. The battery, the load, the panels, the adapters, and the charging method all matter. One thing I do like is that the battery holds a charge well when it is simply being stored normally. But there is an important detail. If you turn on Bluetooth and then Wi-Fi, the unit can slowly drain because Wi-Fi stays active, even if you are not actively using the unit. That is not a deal breaker, but it is something I wish was more obvious upfront. If you are storing it for emergency backup, you should check your settings and understand what mode it is in. The app is useful, but I would describe it as basic. It gives access to the main functions, and it shows inputs and outputs, which is exactly what I want to see. But the information can be slow to update. Sometimes I would look at the numbers and think nothing was changing, then a few minutes later the data would catch up. It works, but it does not feel especially fast or polished. For a system like this, I would love the software to feel a little more refined. UPS mode is another area where expectations matter. In UPS mode, the unit can keep power flowing in the event of an outage, but that convenience comes with battery drain. The system uses a constant amount of power in that mode, so if you leave it sitting there expecting the battery to stay full indefinitely, you may be surprised. There is also a backup-only style mode that helps avoid that constant drain, but then the power does not come on instantly during an outage. There can be a short delay. For most household items that may be fine, but for certain electronics or internet equipment, that delay might matter. The scheduling feature is helpful in theory, especially if you want to charge and discharge during certain times of day. But there are some quirks. If you travel and open the app from a different time zone, the schedule can change based on your local time zone. That is something I would really like to see improved, because a backup system should feel predictable, even when I'm away from home. Solar charging is another area where I learned to pay attention to the details. If your solar panels require an angled jack adapter, use it. Without the correct adapter, the setup may look connected, but not actually charge. That could be extremely frustrating if you discover it for the first time while camping or during an outage. I would definitely recommend testing the entire solar setup at home before relying on it anywhere remote. Also, if you are using third-party solar panels, do your research carefully. Just because the panel wattage looks good on paper does not mean the real-world input will be what you expect. Panel compatibility, wiring, parallel connections, and input behavior all matter. This system can be very useful with solar, but I would not assume every panel setup will automatically perform perfectly. Another thing to know is cold weather behavior. The battery can discharge in freezing conditions, but it may not recharge below 0 degrees. I do wish the battery was heated, because for anyone using this in winter outages, that limitation matters. If your backup plan involves cold garages, sheds, cabins, or winter camping, think through where the unit will sit and how you will keep it within a usable charging temperature. Customer service, in my experience, has been responsive overall. Email replies came back promptly, and when there was a specific charging issue, it eventually got resolved with the right guidance. Firmware updates can also make a difference. I had some concerns about errors and stability, especially when using the system in a UPS-style setup with constant connected loads. But software updates helped address some of that. Still, this is an area where I think the product needs continued improvement. For a premium backup system, reliability and clear air handling are extremely important. What I like most is the capability. When it is set up correctly, it feels like a strong, practical backup solution. It can support real household needs, not just small gadgets. It is especially handy at camp, where there is no electricity, or in a rural home where keeping the fridge, freezer, and water running makes a major difference. What I like least is that the system asks you to understand more than you might expect. The app is basic, some updates are slow, Wi-Fi can drain the battery, UPS mode uses power continuously, cold charging is limited, and solar setup details can trip you up if you don't test everything first. So my balanced conclusion is this. The Jackery Solar Generator 5000 can be a very capable and reassuring backup power system, especially for outages, rural homes, camp use, and essential appliances. But it is not a plug-it-in-and-forget-it solution for every situation. You need to plan your loads, understand the modes, test your solar setup, and keep an eye on the app settings. If you do that, it can be a very useful part of a home backup plan. If you have any questions about this product, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Thanks for watching, guys, and have a great day.